Okay, so let's start. So this is signal analysis one, and here we go. I'm using, in this case, Signal version 706. This is the 64-bit version, but there will be no difference between this and the 32-bit for what we're going to do today. Okay, now I'm going to start with a configuration, a sampling configuration. Now remember, if we've saved a configuration, we can go straight to right-click on the gray area of Signal, select sample bar list, load a configuration through this add button here, and give it a comment. And once we're set, press OK, and then we can add the script and sample bars to the screen. So list here, rapid, the ICF, SICF, and the evoked examples. I pass over this one I've created today, evoked response configuration. So here we go, click it, and we go straight into sampling. Now we haven't started acquiring data yet, but the screen has been laid out. Now, if you add anything else to this window, perhaps other XY views, analysis windows, and you want to save that as a configuration, the best thing to do is start sampling, record for 1 or 2 frames, stop, finish, and then save the configuration via file, save configuration as. Then that at that point, all of the settings, window sizes, colors of channels, background colors, cursors, etc., should all be in place. Okay, so that's what I did earlier. What I have here is a cycling state of TMS waveforms. I'll start now. There's the first data point, and this represents the peak-to-peak amplitude of the waveform in a range from 0.26 seconds to something like 0.35 seconds. And I've used an info window based on the XY view here to produce text output of the amplitude, peak to peak, of the latest frame, the previous measurement, that is the frame before, and the difference between the two. So you can quite quickly see whether you're getting a larger, smaller, or the same amplitude MEP, for example. Now, I'm picking on TMS here, but it could be any evoked response for which we could use these analysis techniques. One thing I've seen a lot of people do is also place horizontal cursors on the screen as a good visual guide. Now, if we chose that we needed a 1 millivolt or 2 millivolts peak-to-peak spike, then we could drag this horizontal cursor into place. But it's rather difficult to get it to exactly 1 millivolt. So right-clicking, H-cursor 1, and set position to exactly 1 millivolt. And we can add another cursor using this button here and place it as a set position to -1 millivolt. Okay. Also possible to label these cursors, both vertical and horizontal, with the right click. Some might want to use active mode, where this could set the cursors to the peak and trough of the spike behind, or the response behind. Okay, so that's a little bit of a background. So once again, an info window based on the XY view that we see to the right. Now the XY view is set up using either this button here, measurements, or through analysis, measurements, and in this case, a trend plot, because we're taking one measurement per frame per channel in the XY view, meaning I can have multiple channels in this XY view, each with a different measurement based on the frame, based on a single frame. Okay, so let's see what we did to get the XY view, and I'll go to Process Settings. This is the first dialog that would pop up if we'd clicked on new XY trend plot. Right, just a break just for a second. Lara is asking, could you include the frame state in the info window? Indeed we can, and that's very easy. So if I go to settings, if I put a /n in there, that gives us a new line. And then by the double arrows here, frame number, current frame state, and apply. Now, I've set up 12 different states here, each with an arbitrary waveform inside, which, so I need as many states as I have example waveforms to play out. Okay, so I hope that answers your question. Now, I could just very quickly tidy that up too. So /n state equals, there we go. How about that? Now, the big thing about the info windows is that they take over a lot from the status bar here. If I right-click on the data, you can see that the state is rather small, the maximum frame number, all of this is rather difficult to see. Now, with a window like this, I can stretch it out and make the font pretty much as large as I like for the distance I'm viewing the screen. Okay. Just pop that away, and I'll just get back to the XY view. But I see there's just one other question. Could you show us the keyboard use? Can you expand on that, Karina? Do you mean to just write into the keyboard characters? Okay, if you can get back to me, that'd be great. Okay, so trend plot. The plot channel. I can rename this plot channel. Only a label for the channel. And I'm plotting now the frame number on the x-axis versus peak to peak on the y-axis. I've chosen the source channel from the data as channel 1. That's because this is my supposed response. Remember, this is pre-recorded. And I'm illustrating the recording in analog form of the digital pulse that may have produced the result here. As well, I should mention a digital marker, which is much more efficient to indicate when that TTL or digital pulse was sent to the stimulator. And you can see I've got multiple markers in this frame to indicate perhaps magnetic, electrical, sound stimulation, all happening at different times. Right, so I'll just finish off here. We could now add another channel where we might say that this is area. And therefore, I'm sticking with the same x-axis value, but I'm going to change to area on the y. Same channel, could be any of the channels that we are recording, and then perhaps a different start time. Or in fact, these could be linked to cursors. And that's going to become more and more important. So if we're starting to use active cursors, these vertical cursors in the first instance will move out to say peaks and troughs and other major features of the waveform, perhaps percentage repolarization. Those then represent times for us. And we can use those in this dialog, as in cursor 0 and cursor 1, as positions, moving positions per frame to obtain the area measurement. Now, I'll stick with the same values here for the time being. One other point to mention is when we export the data, if we want to export the data, we will, by default, have now 2 columns of X and 2 columns of Y. Now, switching all channels use same X, if that is true, will result in only a single X column and 2 Y columns for representing our 2 channels. Okay, so let's select change and say OK. Now, next thing to do is to decide what we're processing. At the moment, I've insisted that it's all filed frames, meaning all of the data that is written to disk, as opposed to all sampled frames. The sampled frames, of course, are those that are sampled but not necessarily kept. They could be thrown away as soon as a new frame comes through. Remember, we've also got this concept of marking each frame with the state, the outputs used. So here we have frame state, so I can insist that only state 6 of R12 is ever processed. And that would be rather boring. We'd end up with exactly the same values for each sweep. Tagged frames and untagged frames, much more useful offline, where you want to discriminate perhaps a frame which has been damaged by an artifact or overloaded the amplifier. We want to exclude it, so all untagged frames. Or tagged, where we want to make a small selection perhaps of frames of interest. Okay, so that's all file frames, and then frame subset. So I'm all sampled and saved frames, but then of that set, I want frame state or tagged or untagged frames. I'm going to stick with all frames. I can slow down the drawing as well. If we've got lots of frames coming through very quickly, lots of sweeps coming through very quickly, then it may be difficult to appreciate what's happening with the data. So I can slow this down by setting the frames between updates. And we've got optimized X and Y axes afterwards switched on. Okay. So there we have it, an XY view and info windows, one connected to the XY view, the other connected to the data view. Right, now, Karina has come back to me. Could you show us the keyboard use? Yes, I'm talking about the 3 keyboard on the millivolt axis. Ah, right, I get you. So, I don't find it particularly useful in data sampling in Signal, but we can place keyboard markers. Okay, so I'll just wait. Okay, HELLO, HELLO, HELLO. So I'm just trying to type. Right, now you see that I'm failing to get anything. Yes, but these keyboard markers are widely spaced. I'm trying to spell out hello there in the keyboard channel. Now, a lot of this data, that the collection here is happening too quickly for me for this frame length. If you're dealing in gap-free mode, so virtually, well, it is a continuous data capture, or have longer sweep lengths, then I can see the point of having the keyboard channel there, where you might want to mark something, an indicator that something had changed perhaps, or some reference point anyway in the frame. So that's the keyboard channel. And I hope that answers your question. The digital marker, though, is put in by the graphical sequencer or text sequencer in this case. So I've carefully placed those markers at the time that the digital pulse will go out. Okay, so rather than wiring out of the digital output port back into an ADC and wasting 5,000 samples a second on this channel, I get a single event like that with a code, and that's much more accurate. In fact, I think I can show you that when we zoom in, even at 5,000 hertz, this is the accurate marker, but the waveform, unless we sample it faster still, still has this slant to it. And will have the digital pulse as well will have a slant to it, but it's much faster to rise and be logged in time. So trying to set a threshold here to say, okay, here's the crossing, we'd be out by some way. And I'll explain why there's a difference there in a second. And that's because if we go to our pulse outputs now and to a state. What I was finding was that I had a timing error. And I'll show you that here. So timing fault 1. At the moment, I'm trying to place this marker at the same time as this digital marker on dig out 0 here. Now, because of the resolution, that is the sequence of resolution, the number of clock ticks it takes to execute a command, then the two items are colliding, or rather they're colliding when I'm trying to switch off the digital pulse, which causes us a timing fault. And the quick fix for that is to extend the pulse length. So the digital output pulse is no longer 1 millisecond, it's 2 milliseconds, and the timing error has gone away. Okay. Now, as you can see, the states all have different arbitrary waveforms held in them. And I've carefully loaded up those from an existing data file that I've been set. Here at state 12, we don't seem to have a response at all. Now, the other markers you see here hold different codes. So they're indicating to me when different types of stimuli were delivered. And I'll use those later for some further analysis. Okay. So we've got some fixed horizontal cursors just to give us a guide as to the size of the response here. We've got our textual output as well. To make it easier to see what's happening on the screen, I'm just expanding the upper channels area using shift and drag. Right. So now I think we need to move on to other types of analysis. Then back to the data view and to new result view, perhaps a waveform average. What do I want to average? We can actually average both channels, so all channels here. And I can say that the width of average is 1 second, which I believe would match the total width here. Yes, the total width of the data file, data frame. We could reduce this and then set a start offset. So we're focused more around this area rather than averaging the whole width. But we'll just try and match this first with error bars on and average starts at 0 and display mean. The new, again, the same process dialog appears. What do you want to process? All sample frames, and whether we're using a particular frame state, all frames, or tagged or untagged. And okay, and this is already, if I right click, I should be able to get, no, I go to view and file information. I can see that we've got, no, I'm just going to show you the number of captured sweeps already because it's processed all data that's in the data file already. Okay, so that's why this average seems rather stable, not moving. If I hit clear this average, there's the first frame. There's the second, and now we start getting error bars. There we go. Once again, shift, drag the line to expand the area. Now, this is another data file. I can save this as a CFS file, and with it come all the active cursors, the fit functions that you have in your original data file. So an average, let's pop that over here for a moment. And now we might go to something like power spectrum. All channels, well, we'll just use channel 1 here. 256 point. Now, we must make sure that the FFT size, the number of data points, fits into the frame. Otherwise, we're not going to get a result at all. So 5,000 hertz over 1 second, obviously 5,000 data points. So anything up to 4096 will work. There we go. So this is the power of the waveform. And as some of you have already seen, we can set the x-axis type to logarithmic. There we go. Right. Okay, just another quick question. I think it's covering what we've already spoken about. Sorry, I missed the start of the session. To clarify, is there? I don't. Right. Okay, if you set up a digital out for a TTL out and want to add a digital marker to mark the onset of this pulse, do you need to add a physical feedback connection or simply add a digital marker to the pulse contact window? It's internal. Okay, so what we're saying is that we do not need an output connected to an input, as we have seen with this channel 2. So that's where I'm sending out a digital pulse, which will go off to a magnetic stimulator, a electrical stimulator. I've simply rerouted that background to the ADC. So I'm digitizing the pulse that's gone out, which is a waste. It's a waste in terms of number of data points we're saving into a file. That is, it's a waste if we can replace it with something that's better. That digital marker is better in terms of timing. The markers could be placed at the beginning and end of the pulse as well if you wanted to know duration. Okay. It also makes it much easier in one's mind's eye for an active cursor to find data points. So you could set a range that find where the stimulus is. So cursor 0 or another cursor can be set to data points as its search mode. We will look at that. Okay, and there was a second question. I hope that's answered your question there. And oh, sorry, microphone is low. So sorry, I missed the start of the session. To clarify, can you only do these type of analysis live during original data acquisition, or can you do it offline too? Everything I'm doing now can be repeated offline, and of course you can edit, modify the responses. You can take over and say, okay, I don't believe where the active cursors have found the features. I don't believe they're correct, so therefore you can manually change those positions or even inject some conditioning control using a script. So everything we're doing now can be done offline. I hope that answers your question. So back to the analysis functions here. Remember the average and the power spectrum. I think we understand what's going on there. I don't think we need to see the power anymore. I'm going to ask Simon Parker, a colleague, to talk more about these memory views next week. So I just wanted to introduce you to the idea of a waveform average and a power spectra. He'll talk more about leak subtraction, the amplitude histogram, and interval histogram. And I can briefly mention that an auto average here is a form of waveform average, but where you might want a sliding window. So we might form an average over, say, 6 sweeps, but then the next average is formed from the 3rd sweep in for another 6 sweeps. So he'll explain a little more about that next week. Right, back to our data here, and imagine we have these digital marks indicating when these different stimuli are occurring. So we could ask cursor 0, if I can trap him for a second. Now I'm going to do this a little more with a little more finesse. I'm going to pause at end. So that stopped the outputs, that stopped the fixed interval mode that I'm working in now from operating. And I'll select cursor 0 and I'll say active mode, at which point I'm going to ask it to find data points on the digital marker, and then I can set a time range. So this may be after 0 time. It may be min time to max time, so the complete range of the sweep. And I can say OK, or I can set a point count. So we could search from left to right, and I could say point count is 3. So it would try to find the third digital marker in a list. Now, I don't always have that many. I'm going to leave this as point count 1. When I say the third, it could be any number, but imagine you're always after the electrical stimulation, which is always your third marker. So we're jumping to that, and we want to use that as a reference time for taking other measurements. I'll say OK, and then I'm going to move on and start continuing with the recording before generating another XY plot. On to another question. Does clicking pause at end stop data collection, or just stop your screen from refreshing? The data is being collected. No, we're actually paused. We have stopped the data collection until I continue again. Or if I were to continue, we'll get another sweep, but pause at end is still switched on. So this will remain in that fashion until we switch off pause at end. Now, there's no reason why you can't go back through your data and look at, in this case, frame 4 of max 275. Okay, so I can do whatever I like here. I can start taking measurements on this data, and sampling measurements are being taken in the background as new data arrives. Just out of interest, Control G, enter the frame number to go to. So if I wanted to go to 200, there it is. Control G, 0. That's now the current frame. Okay. So again, I hope that's answered your question. Yes, cursors. So we've got cursor 0 jumping to the data points on the digital channel. Now, when we see a frame which has more than one digital marker, you should see cursor 0 step a little bit. Too quick, really. Right, so it's moving. At least you can see it's jumped to the first marker there. There again, it's moved. Now, cursor 1 moved as well, and that's because it's set up in an active mode to find keyboard markers. So it must have failed its search because there were no keyboard markers. So I think we're going to change the search mode here. Say find the maximum value after the trigger, and that's going to be on channel 1 from the time of cursor 0 to cursor 0 plus a rate. So let's say that's 0.0. Let's say 0.1 in this case. Add a plus there. And we'll notice that the start position, if this marker coincides with the stimulus artifact, we're most likely going to get a maximum value, or can get a maximum value at the stimulus time. We don't really want that. So let's step away by 5 milliseconds and see what happens. So immediately, cursor 1 has jumped to its new position. If I zoom in here, you'll see this jumping around a little more. There we go. So at the end of the frame must complete before the cursor will go into the correct position. Right. Now, I'll just generate another XY view, a trend, an XY view as opposed to a trend plot. And that's because I want to introduce the idea of cursor 0 stepping multiple times through each frame. so that I can produce multiple calculations or multiple measurements for the frame based on that single cursor's movement. So cursor 0, it is set to data points. It's looking throughout the whole range of each frame on channel 4. It's looking for each and every data point. And then we come down to what you should already recognize as the trend plot controls. Let's say this is max value as a name, and we're going to plot the frame number versus the value at point. And that value at point is going to be measured on channel 1, and it is the position of cursor 1. Whereas cursor 1 locates the feature, the peak, then it'll report its amplitude to this XY view. Now, as we've got some frames that have got multiple triggers, that is, multiple markers to say there is an event, the stimulus, then we should see a slightly different view what we have in the current XY view. Let's go new, and again processing all frames just because of the type of data I've got at hand. Working through a lot of data there. So once again, it's gone through to the beginning of the file, and if we can, yes, I'm going to stop the auto scale, automatic scaling, and just switch all of these off so I can show you what's happening. Right, so you can see, I must have missed a point. You can see at points here, there are multiple markers indicating values that have been taken for that one frame. So I can tell you, frame number 235 had 3 measurements. Okay, so starting here, we've come into the new frame at this point, that's probably the MEP, followed by 3 other points a little further on in the file with a lower amplitude. And before that, we were going back 1, 2, 3 frames, and there were 2 digital markers indicating 2 triggers, 2 stimuli. So that's the difference between an XY view and an XY trend plot. Now, again, we could add more channels to the XY view here, and it doesn't have to be taking measurements as simple as the amplitude of the peak. We could look at process settings and value at point, value difference, value above baseline, value ratio, etc., frame number, state, area, curve area. I've mentioned the different types of area measurement before. So we have modulus, curve area, and area, the slope, etc. Now, that could be the slope between 2 cursors, where we found a 20 and 80% repolarization, and we will look at that in a few moments again. Right, so peak, troughs, values, etc. And at the bottom here, you'll see frame variables. So these can be automatically written to the frame and often hold information such as the intensity of the TMS, the magnetic stimulator that's used for that response. It could also contain information about paired pulse intervals. Other variables, user variables, can be injected by you, perhaps through a script, writing saying, well, I've chosen to choose this intensity, this control, some marker, some information we wish to place within the frame. Right, let's have a look then at the cursors. Now, I've left this at pause end. We've got cursor 1 here, cursor 2, active mode. Or cursors 1 through 9 have more search capabilities than cursor 0. Cursor 0 is really designed to get you into the region of interest. And from that point, the other cursors will fan out. So the idea being, cursor 0 in this case could find the stimulus artifact, could find the rising or falling edge of the TTL pulse that went out, or as we've shown, it's locking itself to the digital marker that we've produced internally in the 14.1. So much more simple search features, peaks, troughs, threshold crossings, etc. Once that's been located, then other cursors are told to find their location if they're set to active mode. So we might ask cursor 2 now to find a trough, and it's on looking on ADC1, that's the channel 1 rather, and we're going to limit its search range from cursor 1 back to 0.25 seconds. Now I keep meaning to talk about the fact that that's 0.25 seconds, when really we should have set it to be 0. And I think I'm just going to say okay to that and explain while I remember. So this is incorrect. I don't want 0.25 seconds to be the time of the pulse going out. I want it to be 0. So what I should have done within my sampling configuration, had I gotten to it, been able to get to it, then I would set the x-axis offset in the general tab, the channels tab, general tab, the sampling configuration to 0.25, which would reposition 0 for the next data farm. Now, recently, we've added a command, and it's just gone from my mind what it's called, but we are now able to realign the x-axis. So I think it's bin 0. Just have a look. So F1 for help, or from the pull down, bin 0. Yes, returns the x-axis position. From 7:06 onwards, you can set the frame start time. Okay, so that would allow you to set your 0 position for any previously captured data. Right, continuing on with cursor 0. Active mode. We have this set to trough find. We've limited the search range, so from cursor 1 backwards, so 0.25 seconds in this case. Might be worth mentioning now that from edit and preferences, you can set your axes, x-axes to milliseconds, microseconds, or seconds as a preference. Minimum amplitude. Okay, now here we're saying that we must find a trough at the lowest point, and then there must be a rise of x here. So if we set 0.5, and we didn't have a dimple in there, we'd be okay. So I'll come back to that in a second. Let's continue on. Yes, so cursor 2 has now found the trough. So that's showing, in this case, the unreliability of that trough detection. And perhaps it would be better to go for a minimum value if we had a rather jagged trough-like shape as we had in the previous frame. Okay, so you're looking for the easiest method of locating these features. And perhaps it means using more cursors than you might think to begin with, to guarantee that the correct positions and amplitudes are found. If we then add cursor 3, there it is, we could look at some of the other functions. Let's say that we wanted to find the minimum value, so minimum on ADC1 again, and looking from cursor 1 to cursor 1 plus 0.02. Okay, so we found the minimum position there. If the cursor fails to find a position, there'll be an asterisk next to the cursor there. And for such features as minimum and maximum, we're always going to find something. There'll always be a minimum and maximum. It'll find the first in the list of maximums or minimums if they are the same amplitude. Okay. If we're looking for peaks or troughs, we will find the first that matches the parameters that we've specified in the given direction that we're looking. So we could be looking backwards through the frame, or we could be looking forward. Now we have the two cursors fitted, set like so. We might produce a fit from analysis and fit data. Looking for an exponential between cursor 1 and cursor 3. And a reference cursor 1, fit into all frames and show the fit between those two cursors. Okay, so working through a lot of data there. That's now 335 frames or so. And there we go. So there's the fit taken there, and we can right click and copy the virtual channel, which will allow you to subtract that fit shape from other data. Now, I'll let Simon talk a little more about that next week, but to go a little bit further into the fitting functions, polynomials, Gaussians, sinusoids, and sigmoids. So if we're looking for an evoked response curve, we could fit a sigmoid and in an XY plot, just as we could fit any of these functions to our waveform data. Right, are there any questions on that so far? No? Okay, I'm just going to try launching a poll here. I haven't tried this before. I'm simply asking you what type of experiments you do, TMS, electrical stimulation, patch clamping, etc. So if you can give me an idea, I'll know where I should really be concentrating by showing you the right data. Can you see that? Okay, so patch clamp, 25%. TMS is building electrical stimulation. I'm assuming that electrical stimulation can be combined with TMS here. Right. Okay, so we've got 40-something% of electrical stimulation. So that probably is combined, right? And 25% of patch clamp and single channel. Now, Simon again will talk much more about the single channel analysis and dynamic clamp next week, but we'll look at some of the patch clamping data in, I guess, just a couple of minutes. Okay. For other, can you give me a quick idea in the chat what you're using that for, please? Okay, so right, thank you for that. Right. So active cursors. Now, remember, we've got the 10 active vertical cursors. We have cursor 0 that can step to different points throughout a single sweep so that we can obtain multiple measurements. These other vertical active cursors will follow it if told. Remember, we have horizontal cursors, which can also be made active. I think I've illustrated this before, but if we asked an active cursor to, say, get value at point, and we asked for it to be at the point of cursor 3, and say, okay, as I move cursor 3 along the data, you can see that the horizontal cursor will follow. If I ask horizontal cursor 3, active mode, to find the mean and standard deviation of the data on channel 1 here, min time up to 0.24. Okay, and I give it a multiplier, 2 standard deviations. That has now calculated data from 0 all the way up to about here, and given me the 2 times the standard deviation, so mean plus 2 times that standard deviation. And that's projected across the rest of the data, allowing me then to place cursors initially in the center position here or somewhere in this region, and then ask them to work left and another to work right, looking for when the data falls into these into the upper or lower cursor if set to the same values, -2 for the standard deviation, by the way, or falls out of it, and that would give us a duration of silent period. Now here we might argue that that isn't the end of the silent period because we've just got 1 or 2 data points out. So we can ask the cursor outside dual thresholds on channel 1, where the start position is cursor 1, and we might go to the maximum time in the frame. First threshold is H cursor 1, I believe that's right. And the second is H cursor 2. Now, if we say delay after crossing, then that will limit what will be found. So if I said that that's got to be 2 milliseconds of data, so, okay, now you'll find that cursor 3 is located this point here where we've deviated away outside above this horizontal cursor for a minimum of 2 milliseconds. Right, I'm going to stop that recording now. Remember, everything we've done so far is possible online as well. One thing to say is I should really mention save the data file, and then if I go close all, then I can have all of these files saved to the same location. Let's go close all without saving. Right, now here we have some patch clamp type data. Now we're still looking at evoked response. Instead of a single short TMS or electrical stimulation, we're now applying a longer term current injection to produce a result like so. We move through data. Cursor 0 could be set to find each one of these peaks, and we can ask other cursors to find the beginning of the peak when it repolarizes, etc. Okay, now just to speed things up a little, I'm going to just tidy up a little, and I'm getting rid of a couple of data files here. Here is the log, the leak. Should say the only window you cannot close is the log view, which is always there in Signal. So it's a clipboard to which we could print various values from a script or from cursor regions, dialogues, etc. Okay, so we've got actions: script, run script, interest spike analysis. So we're looking at channel 2, check individual spikes. Okay, so here we're asking where would we threshold for the spikes. We say okay. Now we've, using the script, we've jumped to the first frame in the file, and we're using chan search as a command, which is equivalent to the cursor search command or active cursor modes to find these positions. So peaks, the repolarization percentages, so 50% rise, etc. And I can move to the next peak that we find, and if I just allow it to run on, there we go. The script has got this advantage of allowing us to format the output. So I've got a title per column. I've then got a frame number. In frame 1, I don't have any results. Frame 2, neither. Frame 3, I've got 1 spike, and these are positions, amplitudes, etc., half heights. And so we can get much more information directly by using a script there. Okay. Let's just step away from that window and come to the leak again. Another little bit of patch clamping type data. In this case, you can see that I've got two cursors. One I've left fixed, and cursor one that I've set to active mode. And it's just finding the maximum in a time range on each of the frames. Now, the frames are overdrawn here. And the reason I did that was so that I can show you that when we do a fit between those two cursors, the fits will change their length according to the various movements of these two cursors. So cursor one moving left and right, finding the new peaks, you can see that the drawn fit range is different in this setup. Okay, I'm just going to break for a second while I have a look at the couple of questions that have come in. So, Teresa, poll other. Define virtual channels by applying a calibration matrix to several data channels. Right. I'd have to have a think about that, but we should introduce the idea of virtual channels. We've touched on that in the introduction, etc. But create a new channel here, and it'll give me an excuse to right-click, copy for VC, and put in here the expression, and close. Now we have the fit taken from this current trace here, the highlighted trace, and I would then be able to create yet another channel as an example, which is channel 1 minus, what channel number have we got here? So I pass over the channel title area, and I get 702 waveform channel. So it's CH 702. There we go. So a simple subtraction, just to give you an idea of the expressions that could be applied here, as well as channel processes, etc. Now, while I'm still thinking about the calibration matrix, I'll just mention that the channel process functions have really taken, in virtual channels, have really taken over from what we had previously, which were modified channels. So if I use modified channels here and I rectify data, no, that's not really suitable. Okay, we might try rectify data. Then I get messages like this. So it's applied, but it's going to want to move to the next frame. Do you want to keep the changes or discard the changes? So this can permanently modify your data, and therefore is quite dangerous. So using virtual channels, it makes it a lot easier to see both your original and the modified forms. All the analysis techniques still apply to those virtual channels, so there's not a problem there. Question about making a script. Will it be covered in any of the next sessions? We will touch on it, but I'm intending to do dedicated script tutorials as well. But we might just touch on scripting now as we move on to something else. So I'm going to say script, turn recording on. I'm going to open the data file. Let's say it's actions again. And I'm now going to introduce the idea of memory channels. I'm going to create a new channel. First of all, it's just going to be a marker. So this is going to reproduce something like the markers that we have at the bottom of the screen. I'm going to import channel 2 on all frames between min time and max time. And this is going to be peaks Oh, let's do this data rising through a level, shall we? And we'll use the level of the horizontal cursor. The reason I've changed to data rising is because I've already picked out the peaks into this memory channel. And then I'm setting a minimum interval. Well, minimum interval could help with any noise that we might have on the rising phase of this data, or you might wish to find the rising phase here and then ignore any other spikes for a period of time. I'm going to set that to 0. I think this is clean enough. Okay, now you can see the new memory channel, M2. I'll drag that up here. Label the 04, a code meaning data rising, and that should coincide or be the same as data intersecting with the horizontal cursor. Right, we close that. Go back to where we were. Script, turn recording off. Now this has produced a very good copy, script-wise, for the actions I went through. In fact, in some cases, it's too accurate. For example, it's taken the name of the file that I opened. Well, obviously, if I'm doing this sort of analysis, I'd probably want it to apply it to many files. So I'd need to know to take that name out, and this becomes what you would call a wildcard. So without a name, file open means, well, if I haven't got a name, open the dialog and allow the user to select. But everything else, if the channels are correct, that is that the channel to import from is there in the data file that I next call up, everything that I did before can be applied to the new file. So that's a script being built there. We can write scripts for you, given a specification. Obviously, if you're Pfizer, Novartis, and all the other types of guys who might make a little more money out of this, we may charge for our time. But generally speaking, we have a library of scripts that we're happy to hand over. And of course, we could offer you modifications to those scripts as well. So please get in touch with us with your specifications. Now, you also have a number of scripts in your documents, like 6, 7, etc. Files, folders, which can be quite useful for you. And I can make the action script that I use today available as well. Okay, continue on with the memory channels. Another here, not marker, but a real mark. So the same idea here, that we're creating a memory channel, but of a different type, a real marker type. I'm going to import, again, channel 2. And this time, I'm looking for peaks. And max times the whole sweep length, and the level peaks. Okay, so the size of the peaks must be, say, 20 units in this case. So looking for a local maximum, and then we must have a fall away from it of 20. And there's 0 for the minimum interval in my case. Okay, so we should now have created into M3 a trace like so. Now, instead of a single marker saying, here I found a peak, we've now got the value at the peak as well. And for that, we could go in and modify, deleting items, importing again another section of another channel, perhaps into the same data, and indeed add items here. So if I were to choose cursor 4, which I haven't used there, and set this add items to cursor 4 and set a value, I don't know, of 37 to show that it's different. Add, there we go. There's my new marker. Now, memory channel information is all held in the resource file, not inside the data file here. So you must remember, if you wish to keep these memory channels, keep the resource together with the data file in the same folder. Right. So analysis. We've got through the memory channels, we've touched on the virtual channels. We did a little bit more of these in the introduction where we looked at spectra and so on. So please tell me if you'd like me to go over those in any more detail. I think the others here, the buffer and the modified channels, as I said, they tend to have been superseded a lot by the virtual channel functions these days. What I'd like now to show you is some data that was sent to me just the other day. Yes, here it is. Now we could do some analysis there, but they did indicate that somewhere in their file they had changed filtering characteristics. I think I picked up the wrong one there. Let's see if I can find that again. Okay, so I have lost 6 or 5. 5. So right. So working through the data here, there we go. Right. So we have here rather noisy data. I'm going to separate M1, which is finding all the peaks, and look at this channel only. Now comparing this channel or this frame with the previous, and I think host frames, yeah. So this is rather nice and clean. This one suffers from a lot of high frequency noise. So at this point, it might be an idea to mention digital filters. And I'll choose FIR, finite impulse response filters over IIR, infinite impulse response, and show details. So if I'm assuming that this is a high frequency noise, I would set my filter to low pass. And I'm trying, by dragging the filter profile, I can change which type of filter I have here from the drop-down list. I'm trying to get this band under the minus 75 dB to make a much better filter for our purposes. So too steep, and you'll find that the wobbles in the band tend to go up. Okay, so that's getting worse and indicated by an amber light on our system there. Okay, so I won't move it around too much more, but you can see that we're now taking a lot more of the high frequency noise out of the signal and leaving behind this lower frequency noise. But with such bad wobbles here, I may have damaged the signal that I'm really interested in this area. I'm going to take that out just a little bit further. Okay, so we've got a relatively good indication that the filter is okay. Even further, too far, and I'm starting to bring back in the noise. Okay, so perhaps I might use an IIR filter for this work, which will give me much more control, but has the disadvantage of possibly moving peaks and troughs. And so if the peak and trough is, if you're measuring between a stimulus time and the peak or trough, then you can start being, the measurements can be out because of that filter shift. Okay, so I'm going to apply this and we're going to write it. We're going to use channel 2, go right, and that should be the new data. Okay, so just an introduction to the filters that are available in the analysis program. Okay, so discard. And when I close, I'm asked whether I wish to keep the filter. In this case, no. Right. Now, where are we? We're just coming up to time, I think, and I'm looking at multiple frames, buffers, virtual channels. Okay, so I think we've shown everything I wish to this week. Active cursors, I think that they're always going to come back because they're just so useful, and how we can describe how they can be used in different circumstances. So for some people, looking at field potentials, finding the two peaks and a trough, and then taking measurements of area, curve area under the curve is one way. For EMG, it's another slight technique change. And again, for the voltage clamp type data, once again, slight differences. But all of these analysis techniques are available for all of the waveform windows that we have. So even producing a waveform average and then asking cursors to find max min threshold crossings, etc., is possible. Okay, so can I ask for any questions at all? Except we have one now. Where can we watch presentations back? I'm slowly, I'm afraid, putting them up onto YouTube, and we will make the notification, or tell you which channel they're on as soon as they're posted. I think I've only managed to get Marjorie 2 that she's posted at the moment. Okay. I think then, Teresa, can I talk to you offline about defining virtual channels by applying a calibration matrix? So I fully understand what you mean. If it's useful to other people, what I'll do is probably just record a short video of that process and put that alongside this video when it finally goes up. Okay. So Teresa, I hope for the meantime that you've got enough out of this session. I hope you all have. So one last chance here. Any more questions? And yes, okay. Right. So the question is, are the active cursor settings saved in the resource file so that they can be used again in a different file? Okay, let's just prove a point here. So we're going to call up two files. Okay, here's one. This is just 006, and we have this one 005. Okay. Now for a start, we're going to do background color, channel background color, and because I'm in a decorating mood, I'm going to choose yellow for that one. For channel 2, a blue, and say OK to that. I'm going to reposition the channels, show all, set cursor 2 to find the minimum value on channel 2, and that's between minimum time and maximum time. And I'm now going to ask cursor 1 to find the maximum on channel 2 between min time and max time again. Okay, and optimize, which is page up, page down, and step through the file. So hopefully, yes, there's a little bit of data. Okay, so not a great image, but it's different. If I now either close this file, and therefore automatically the resource file will be saved with the same name, but with the resource extension, or I go File, Resource, and Save Resources As, and we'll call this test. Okay. Doesn't have to be in the same location as the data files, because this has its own name. And now we take this data file, I'll put this one over here, take this data file, File, Resource Files, Apply Resource File, the same test, or I can go and grab the resource files that already exist with the data Yes, there we go. The same parameters, cursors, colors, etc. Position of the window, as you saw, is now taken and applied to the new window. So yes. Right. Any other questions for the time being? Okay, so just a message from Marjorie. So one last chance for questions, and I think we'll call it a day today. Well, as I mentioned, next week, a little more on patch clamping, single channel work, open close times, histograms, etc. And there will be some repeat of active cursors and some other functions, because they do have a role to play in many other types of data analysis as well. Okay, well, thank you very much for coming along, and I hope to see you next week. But if in the meantime you have any other questions, please contact us, me, or anybody else here directly. Okay, thank you very much, and goodbye.